I still remember the first day we stood on that barren plot of land. Nothing but dust, grass, and dreams. George held my hand, his fingers rough from work but warm and steady, and said with a grin, "We'll build it here, Maggie. A place that'll hear our laughter and our fights, our stories and our silence." I believed him. I always did. Those were the days when love wasn't about luxury, it was about effort. George and I saved every penny, worked long hours, and spent weekends mixing cement under the hot sun. I painted walls with my bare hands, humming lullabies even before I had children to sing them to. We didn't have much, but somehow, every corner of that house felt rich. Rich with hope, with sweat, with something real. The house slowly took shape. The little porch where George promised we'd drink tea every morning, the garden where I planted roses from my mother's old seeds, and the living room that always smelled like fresh bread and laughter. It wasn't perfect. The roof leaked sometimes and the paint faded, but it was ours. Every creak in the floorboard told a story. Every stain on the wall had a memory. When our son David was born, I thought my heart might burst from love. I spent nights rocking him to sleep beside the same window where George and I once dreamed of the future. We filled that house with noise, toys scattered across the floor, birthday candles glowing year after year, and the sound of George's deep laugh echoing through the hallways. Then life started changing. David grew up and became busy with his own world. George's hair turned silver, and my hands started shaking when I tried to thread a needle. But through everything, the house stayed constant, like a faithful old friend that held every version of us inside its walls. When George passed away, it felt like the house went quiet too. The chair by the fireplace where he always sat stayed empty for days. I couldn't bring myself to move it. Sometimes I'd wake up and make 2 cups of tea out of habit, only to realize he wasn't there to drink his. The walls that once felt warm began to feel heavy, filled with echoes I couldn't escape. That's when David and Lila stepped in. They visited often, concerned at first, bringing groceries and helping with the bills. Lila would say, "Mom, you shouldn't be living alone. You'll exhaust yourself." I appreciated the care truly. When they suggested putting the house in their names, just for legal protection, they said, I hesitated for only a moment. But they were my family, and I trusted them completely. I signed the papers one quiet afternoon. The pen felt heavier than I expected, but I brushed away the strange feeling that crept up my spine. I told myself it didn't matter who the house belonged to on paper. It would always be home, my home. The first few months after that were fine. Lila decorated a bit, moved some things around, and David said he wanted to help with maintenance. But every now and then, I'd catch her giving me strange looks when I sat in the living room for too long, as if I were a guest in my own house. I laughed it off. Families change, I told myself. Children grow. Homes evolve. But deep down, I think I already knew, something precious had shifted. Not just in ownership, but in heart. The house that once sheltered my life's love was slowly turning into something else. A house of distance. A house of silence. A house that was still mine in memory, but no longer in spirit. It started with small things. Things so ordinary, you almost don't notice them until they pile up like dust on forgotten shelves. At first, it was the curtains. Lila said the floral ones I'd hung for decades were too old-fashioned. She replaced them with gray ones, modern and heavy, that shut out the sunlight I used to love. I told her the old ones had memories. They'd fluttered in the breeze during David's childhood summers, but she just smiled politely and said, "It's time to move on, Mum." Then she started changing the furniture, repainting the walls, rearranging the photographs. My wedding photo with George, once proudly hanging above the fireplace, was quietly moved to the hallway, replaced by a large abstract painting that meant nothing to me. When I asked why, she said, "It doesn't match the new decor." That hurt more than I expected. It wasn't just a picture. It was my life. David said nothing. He had begun to work longer hours and seemed too tired to listen when I tried to talk. He'd pat my shoulder, call me Mum, and assure me Lila meant well. "She's just trying to make the house look nicer," he said one evening, while scrolling through his phone, barely looking up. I nodded, though my heart felt a small tear each time they brushed my feelings aside. One Sunday, I decided to bake. It used to be our family tradition. Cinnamon rolls in the morning, laughter filling the kitchen. But when Lila walked in, she frowned. "Oh, Mum, we don't eat sugary things anymore. You'll just make a mess." That day, I put the rolling pin away. Weeks turned into months, and the warmth that once filled the house began to fade. My slippers disappeared from their spot near the sofa. My chair was replaced with a new one that fit the aesthetic. Even my roses in the garden started to wither, neglected because when the first hint of dawn touched the sky, I rose from the bench, brushed the dew off my coat, and took a deep breath. It was time. At exactly 9 o'clock, I walked into the lawyer's office. The same kind old man who had handled our family's property for decades. He looked up from his desk, his eyes widening in surprise. "Mrs. Ellison," he greeted. "It's been a long time. What brings you here?" "I'd like to sell my house," I said. My voice was calm, too calm. He frowned slightly. "You mean the property on Willow Lane? But I thought you—" "Yes," I interrupted gently. "I transferred part of it to my son years ago. But not all of it." He blinked. "You're still listed as co-owner. They never completed the final transfer." A slow, bittersweet smile curved on my lips. "Then it's still partly mine." He nodded, already pulling out the necessary papers. "Technically, you can sell the property. You have every right." Every right. The words felt like sunlight after a long storm. I spent the next hour signing documents. My hands steady, my heart strangely peaceful. Each stroke of the pen felt like reclaiming a piece of myself they'd tried to erase. I thought of George and how proud he would have been. He always said, "Maggie, never let anyone make you small in your own story." By noon, everything was ready. The house was listed for sale. My lawyer assured me that in today's market, it wouldn't take long. I told him not to worry. I wasn't waiting for long anyway. True to his word, by mid-afternoon, a young couple came to see the place. They were newlyweds, hopeful, nervous, their eyes filled with the same light George and I once had. The woman smiled warmly at me, saying how she could already picture her future children playing in the garden. That moment sealed my decision. I signed the sale contract that very afternoon. As I handed over the keys, I didn't cry. The house that once held my laughter and my tears had long stopped being a home. Selling it wasn't a loss, it was liberation. When I walked away, I didn't look back. My shadow stretched long across the pavement, light and unburdened. Later that evening, as I sat in a small cafe with a cup of tea, I heard my phone buzzing endlessly. David's name flashed across the screen again and again. I didn't answer. Not out of anger, but out of peace. They had taught me what betrayal felt like. I had just taught them what consequences felt like. I smiled to myself as I stirred my tea, watching the sugar dissolve slowly, just like the last remnants of pain inside me. The house was gone, but I was finally free. By the time the sun set that evening, the sold sign was standing proudly on the lawn of the house that once defined my life. The young couple had been thrilled. They said they would move in by the end of the week. I walked away quietly, leaving no trace, no forwarding address, no explanation, not even a note. I spent the night in a small inn at the edge of town. The sheets smelled like lavender, and for the first time in years, I slept without the weight of someone else's resentment pressing on my chest. I woke to birdsong instead of Lila's footsteps, to morning light instead of judgment. Freedom, I realized, doesn't always come with fanfare. Sometimes it arrives quietly, wrapped in peace. By mid-morning, my phone was ringing non-stop. David. Then Lila. Then David again. I didn't answer. The sound didn't make me anxious this time. It only made me certain I'd done the right thing. Around noon, I finally picked up, just once. "Mom, what did you do?" David's voice trembled between shock and anger. "The house, it's gone. We came home and there's a sold sign. You can't just—" "I could," I said softly. "And I did." "Mom, that's our house. You had no right." "Oh, but I did, sweetheart." My tone stayed calm. "You see, you never finished the paperwork. Half of that home was still mine. You told me I wasn't allowed inside it, remember? So, I decided no one should be." There was silence on the line. Then his voice cracked. "Mom, please, we didn't mean." I ended the call before he could finish. For once, I didn't owe anyone an apology. Over the next few days, I finalized the sale. The lawyer transferred the payment into my account, and I withdrew a small portion in cash. Enough for something modest but peaceful. I took a train to the coast, watching fields blur past the window, feeling lighter with every mile that carried me away from Willow Lane. When I stepped off the train, the air smelled like salt and new beginnings. I found a small seaside cottage, whitewashed walls, blue shutters, and a little garden where daisies grew wild. The woman renting it smiled when I said I was looking for something quiet. "You'll love it here," she said. "The sea listens better than most people." She was right. I spent my first evening sitting on the porch, the ocean stretching before me like a promise. I made a cup of tea and spoke softly into the wind, as if George might still be listening. "They said I couldn't come home, love," I whispered. "So I made a new one." In the weeks that followed, I began to live again. I planted flowers, joined the local library, even learned to paint sunsets. My days filled with small joys, the laughter of neighbors, the scent of coffee in the morning, the feeling of owning my peace entirely. Then one afternoon, a letter arrived. The handwriting was familiar, shaky, uncertain David's. It read, "Mum, we're sorry. We didn't realize what we were doing until it was too late. The house feels empty without you, no matter who owns it. Please come home." I smiled, tears gathering softly in my eyes. I folded the letter neatly and placed it inside my journal. Some wounds need no revenge, only the space to heal. I wrote back only one line. "Home isn't a place, my dear. It's the people who make you feel wanted." That night, as I stood by the shore, the waves curled around my feet like gentle forgiveness. The moonlight shimmered across the water, and for the first time in years, I felt George's presence beside me, proud, tender, eternal. I didn't lose my home that day they shut the door on me. They did. And as the tide whispered against the sand, I realized my sweetest revenge had never been about selling a house. It was about reclaiming myself.